rather prestigious institution not the case, and which is a big, big problem.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree. Moving them across borders is the last resort. If you can do it in country, you're much better off. Much better off.
But there's an ongoing effort to get the documentation that Memoria, a civil rights organization in Russia, has collected over the last 30 years out of the country, and there's no way to keep them in the country because it's too risky for that documentation. Very complicated to digitize. Even if you have it digitized, it's not so easy to get it across the border. You need safe transportation means in the digital world as well. Yeah. And you want to make sure that that works. So what I wanted to refer to in your first question, or first set of the first report on archives that are destroyed or in danger of being destroyed by their own governments, or the second question now of safe havens for archives, it says that the archive is not the boring repository of some long gone information. It holds power, and those in charge are afraid of what's in the archive. Otherwise there would be no need to destroy them. They are, on a general level, important for the memory of a nation. Destroying archives destroys the history, destroys the access to different points of view on our own histories. And so that's why they are actually in the catalogue of war crimes. To destroy archives is just as bad as destroying cultural sites and churches and anything like that. But I wanted to, in the second round, because we have very dense, interesting information, come back to this idea of what's in the archive and these complications of truth and facts. Selina, you said it was complicated when you moved the documentation to a site of torture. How to deal with that? How do we remember? How do we keep these sites intact? And how do we deal with the truth in the archive? Because truth means it's the one version, it overrides everything. But I think none of us here sitting thinking that when we say the truth, we mean that it's only one version of what happened, right? So how do you deal with contesting ideas of what happened and how to tell what happened and how to build a narrative within the community but also on the national level?
Well, so we talk a lot in, for example, in Colombia, how do you work with the non-convinced people? No, and what happened? This was happened with us in the ESMA place, because we were in a big building. We are 17 people only in Memoria Abierta, and I used to work so late, at 8 at night. So I was alone in the building, and there was a lot of situations that came people, 50 years old men came into the building and started to tell me, well, I sleep there, and in what time? Well, in the 70s, and you start to talk, and they happen a lot. It happened a lot, and they start to talk about why they live there, because there ESMA was a school, and all the students know what happened inside.
It was a naval training academy, so it was while the naval cadets were trained, the torture was happening in one building on this big compound. So it was a parallel event of regular military training and torture.
And they feel responsibility of that, of what happened, and they can start to speak when ESMA open and in last kind of minimal situations. No, it's.
So you let them speak in public events? Do they tell their
No, there was private events. It's quite like
their perspective is also one voice.
Yes. But I think that one step that was very important in Argentina to start to give some open debates about the narrative and the truth was justice. Okay. I think that the trials that reopened in the 2004, at the same time of ESMA, at the same time of different things, put things in place, because the trials told that the state was the responsibility of the crimes, and allowed a lot of people that feel responsibility speak, like these students, for example, that the collaborators, for example, the woman who were violated or have some kind of relation with the perpetrators, but obviously in a slavery context, no, in a power context, and they start to speak in a slowly way, but I think that it's justice gave a lot of a context to speak.
So the legal accountability and the question of guilt, who's responsible, and it was injustice, gave permission to everybody else to
yes, and to deal with different narrations, no? Because you have in the narration of the True Commission in 1984, it said that was the state, but it said that was a
had justification.
Yes, yes. It said that was two demons, no? The theory of the two demons. There was the state, but was the political movement that
the subversives.
Yes,
the young people that they were called subversives, that they had to fight. So
yes, but they try to, in some cases, they try to compare different situations. But then it's why I saw that then the Junta Astral in 1985 put the state responsibility on the scene, no? And the two demons start to becoming a state terrorism. No? It's like it was very
So it was a process to figure out who was responsible, what was the injustices. So then that opened, and I find it interesting that the legal trials managed to achieve that you reached the next level on which then everybody agreed, okay, this was wrong what the state did, and now we can relate to that.
There is a common sense that is what happened was wrong. Okay. Then there are different memories and different discussions, but for example, we have in 2015, we have a debate that they want to reduce the prison condemn of the perpetrators, and the manifestation was huge.
The demonstrations.
The demonstration against was huge.
Amnesty and early release.
Yes, they call it Super One because they want to reduce the detention of the perpetrators, and that kind of events shows that there are a common sense that the state terrorism was wrong. Then we have a lot of fights. And for example, Memoria Abierta is a human right, it's composed of a human rights organization. So we can set, we are non-neutral. So for example, we don't give information to perpetrators. We don't give information to people who are negationism. We have that kind of...
Negationism, who negate what
yes. There are a lot of people who negate and who wants the two demons theory. And so we don't receive that people.
Okay.
Because Madre de Plaza de Mayo, Grandmother de Plaza de Mayo said, no, we don't give information to the people who are going to use this archive to negationism. Okay. Because we are a human rights organization. No?
You have a clear goal.
Yes.
And if somebody wants to undermine your goal, you don't think they should use your records to do that.
Yes.
And that's very interesting because that's not what you describe, is that point has never been reached. It seems that Argentina has a strong civil society, and then there is, once you agree that it was state terrorism, the state did something wrong, then there's a new level of multi-voices and discussion. Why is it so hard to achieve that?
It is that basically there are few good examples of dealing with the past, socially speaking, and actually accepting on the level of government, institutions, communities and societies that what was done was wrong. One is Germany and Second World War, and other is Argentina, and you know, I had the privilege of being 2 times in Argentina, so I have seen some of the memorials, and I'm aware of nearly 40 years of work, you know, from the time of
this year,
change of government, commission, publishing results of True Commission. As far as I perceive, the report of Argentina Truth Commission never went out of print. So you walk in a shop and you buy a report. I have not seen similar examples from some other commissions in the world. So it's very important that what was put in the report is available. It's available.
The never again. The never
again report.
Nunca más use over the work.
And that there is a 40 years of work in which, you know, Memoria, Abierta, mothers and others work on outreach, work with these established facts on how to present them, how to work with different generations, including youth. But you know, one mistake which we sometimes do when reflecting, it's we always start with youth. It's not just youth. I mean, it's youth, okay, they're a very important group. But what do we do with 70 years old revisionists who are grandfathers and grandmothers of the youth? So if we leave the older revisionists out, where are we?
Well, they tell in their families these stories, so they do reach out to the youth. You know, it's the family story.
They do reach very well.
Yeah,
and we are, you know, in post-Yugoslav countries, we are still largely the oral tradition societies. We read, but you know what is really valued is what you hear at the family table. So if they tell you in the family, oh, okay, here is this book written by academic, and this is what government say. But that doesn't matter, you know, I have been there, I have seen it, so that matters more. So it's that we haven't really reached the level of acknowledgement for scientific proofs.
I want to ask you a question. What Memoria Abierta is dealing with, and I understand about Condor and the network, but it's really an internal country issue. Whereas you're dealing with two different wars that are external. One, the German war, one a war against other states in the Balkans. How much difference do you think that makes?
That makes a lot of difference. Because it's more complex, it is more challenging it is in making it visible. Although it is, you know, it's just important to somehow split things in manageable tasks and value every group of people disregarding the generation with whom you might come in touch. And I would like to mention some examples with my colleagues from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Are just not here now. In sense of remembrance practices, there are fantastic examples in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially of work with war veterans, paying respect to the victims killed on the other side of war, which is now going on for more than 15 years. It's largely facilitated by Centar for Nonviolent Action in Sarajevo and in Belgrade, in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. And it's occasionally linked with work in which the inmates of concentration camps visit the concentration camps which were run by other side or by their own side. So it's, you know, that there are very important things which can be done in between the countries, because in the 90s our wars on the first line had character of international wars, but also elements of civil wars. So it's wherever you have civil wars, it's more difficult. In Second World War there was Nazi and fascist occupation, liberation struggle, but then also elements of civil war. In the violence after the Second World War, I mean, yeah, it's many layers, but it's possible to deal with them if there is a will. So it's that I would say that what we see, either by generation of adults or youth, what they especially value is participation. So it's not just, you know, saying there is archive, go and look. I mean, who will go to look in the archive? Very few people. Very few people. Others, they value when you create, you know, walks. I mean, we move around, we look this, we do that, we discuss. Professional development programs are very important. I think Germany and Argentina have very big development. You know, it's for judiciary, police, physicians, that all make sense, for archivists. And for young, they especially value participation. I mean, the living word is irreplaceable. If they can speak with witness, I mean, they will remember that most of all. For some conflicts, you hardly have any survivors anymore, Second World War. But for the 90s, you know, the survivors are around. And young, really, they value that above all. And if you can organize a dialogue for a larger group, that's very important. But then you of course need to have, you know, we need to have education content nicely prepared, scientifically well done. So you need all the other things. It is a complex challenge. It's a lot of work to be done.
Leo, and then I wanted to inject just one quick thing, because then I'm leaving my role as a moderator. But in Germany, it took 40 years, West Germany I shall say, not East Germany, because we were not united at that point. In 1985, the federal president, the highest ranking politician in the country, said for the first time that the Germans were liberated by the Allies. Up until then, we had lost the war. Right? So the acceptance of the atrocities committed in the names of Germans, expressed by the highest ranking politician, set the stage, and the clarity was, you know, it was still a lot of debate. Some of the old men who were part of the war in 1985, there were plenty around still, criticized it, but as a general, for the people of Germany, it was clear now that it was horribly wrong. We started the war, we committed the Holocaust, and there's no point in running away from that, we have to face it. But it took a long time to get there, 40 years to that very symbolic moment. So it was not even a complex story in that sense. But it's a perpetrator nation, that's also very clear, and that has its own complexities. So it takes time, and it gets more complicated the more voices there are. But the archive, even though we make fun of it, because who goes to the archive, it is very powerful. So otherwise, it wouldn't be under so much pressure. So, yeah. Leo.
Thanks. Just building on the differentiation that you, Trudy, did earlier, I'd like to ask Vesna and Celina. Both of you mentioned that not everything in your archive is actually shared with the public. So I was wondering how you form your access policies. How do you decide what is to be redacted and what is just not to be opened? If there are some principles that I'm sure took some time for you to develop.
Well, it was for Trudy and Celinom.
For Vesna and Celinom.
Well, we were talking with Trudy at the morning about privacy. For example, in Argentina, well, one of the main work that Memoria Abierta did was in this 20 years was talk with human rights organizations about access, and it's related. We don't have any national law related with private archives. We have some kind of I don't know, personal sensitive date. We have an access law recently, but it's not are directly thinking in private archive. We discuss all the time access. For example, thinking in made access, the testimonies, the writing testimonies that the relatives gave at the 70s that the human rights organization took, was impossible to think in the 2000. The human rights organization said that the nouns, the testimonies, are closed, are only for justice and for reparation law, and then because we have there an impunity period, and then when the trials open, that testimony was an evidence. But for example, in 2015, we start to discuss with different of the human rights organizations that, well, we have a lot of trials, a lot of testimonies are known. We maybe start to think in open the testimonies, maybe with some kind of anonymous or some kind of or tools to make to preserve the privacy, and we talk a lot with survivors, and we think in the sovereignty of the archive. So we always try to talk with the producer of that file, of that testimony, and we always want the consent of the people, of the person, of the organization. And so it's a long discussion. we have waves, no? But that is why we are, as I said it all the time, because it's very difficult if we are a public institution. We are a human rights organization. We are the human rights organization. So we have a network of trust. So yeah, the most important thing for us is the trust, and I think that it is that allowed us to work in Latin America, because the network of human rights organizations have the same problems and have built a network of trust that is very important to think. And so we always discuss. We don't have an automatic protocol, and it was something that we discussed in, for example, in Colombia and in Mexico at the True Commission. They were very worried about make protocols, and we said you are not possible to make a only protocol that allows you to put all the on the True Commission. Well, it's true here, but you will have to think the True Commission archive access all the time in context, because if tomorrow you have a war or you have a conflict in some place of Colombia, you will have to shoot and to close that part of the archive. The other year you could open, because I think that human rights archives have to be thinking in the context of production, but in the present, because they are guarantee of rights. So you have to.
Sorry, you to her directly?
Yeah, no, for this question.
Okay, because Vesna was supposed to.
Yeah, I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
I'll be very brief. One thing is rules of conduct of archive, outlining how the archive is functioning. But what is very important are then also consent forms. So it's that consent, especially important in case of recording personal memories. The first consent form is always about accepting recording. The second is about accepting the content to be published. So it's that eventually, after the interview is transcribed, this is our methodology. We share a transcript, and the parts which should not be published can be crossed out. And we, of course, record some interviews which are not to be published in lifetime. So that's other thing. Concerning the data which is permanently not accessible, let's put it like that. The questionnaires, we signed questionnaires on interviews related to killings and forced disappearances. They are not available.
Right.
Right.
Sexual violence.
They are not available. We do not, this is internal documentation, this is stored in archive. It is not shared, simply, full stop. Concerning the protections which we have, the heart of our institution is our information system, where data is, digital data comes in, and it's analyzed. So that system is not, it's out of internet. So it's not on a cloud or something like that.
Yes. Do you want to add something to the archive?
Really quick. The International Council on Archives has principles of access that it has developed. And it has also a manual that goes with it that tries to explain some of the options. The second thing is, for government which might be relevant for you, Leo, is what are called the Schwanni principles, which is principles of access to security information in governments. And again, developed by a coalition of NGOs and others, but those are two really important access documents.
Yeah, sorry, the last thing is we don't have the documents online.
No.
We have remote consult, but we don't have online because we need to know what will be the use for the.
That's right. You know, next to general archival laws, who also have rules on when personal information becomes accessible, data protection laws, transparency laws. Right? There's a lot of legal bodies that you can use to apply to your archive. This documentation, highly sensitive documentation, is a negotiation process, right? So, but many of the state archives leave things open, but there is this general rule: 30 years after a process is over and regular documentation comes into the archive, 110 years after the person was born, their personal information becomes available. So that's a general rule in the German archival world, for instance. But then the principle of data protection or transparency can be applied really easily to these kinds of things. So you had a question, you have a question.
Just to jump in, that, as you were saying, I think the context is the most important because you have many tools to protect data, and like for us, when we went to the field to collect testimonies, we were asking for a consent form, but for me, I've considered that the content was too sensitive, and we have decided to close it, but to make it available on request. And that's also an interesting tool. Then you have to decide on how to select the person, but for some cases, that's...
Just for the rest to know, he talks about Uganda.
Uganda,
very
yeah.
different.
And it's still very actual. So, because first we are thinking, sometimes you have someone speaking today about something under this current government, but tomorrow you have another government. So everything can change. So we cannot guarantee that the current situation will be the same in 10 to 20 years. So you have to consider the long term.
For example, it's not the same than consent that you would get in pre